My name is Alex, but I was born Alexander. I grew up in Russia, and when I was a teenager, my parents decided we should move to the United States so I'd have a brighter future. It was a huge adjustment, learning English, getting used to a totally different culture. But over the years, I managed to settle in. I got my degree, landed a great job at a tech company, and felt like life was on the right track. Eventually, I met my wife, Linda, an American woman with very progressive views. At first, I loved how open-minded she was. But later, some of her ideas started pushing boundaries I never expected. That's where this story begins. Before we start, tell us, where are you listening from? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's dive into this gripping story. I've been married to Linda for a few years now, and for a while, I thought everything was going okay. Sure, she had these modern opinions about freedom and self-expression, but I mostly went along with them, or ignored them, because I wanted our relationship to work. We tried playful things in the bedroom, experimented with certain role-play ideas, that sort of stuff, all in the name of keeping things fresh. But right before our anniversary, Linda told me she wanted to talk, and I knew from experience it probably wouldn't be good. She was nervous, explaining that our marriage could use new sensations. I instantly got on edge. Linda had suggested some wild things before, but she'd never gone this far. That day, she dropped a bombshell. She wanted to spice up our relationship by bringing someone else into our bed. Specifically, a guy named Jeff, a buddy of hers from yoga class and those activist communities she frequented. To say I was shocked is putting it mildly. Essentially, she was asking me to become a cuckold, just standing by while she hooked up with another man in our own home. As a husband, hell, as a man, that was the last thing I ever wanted. I started asking Linda some pointed questions. So, by your logic, if you get to invite some random guy into our bedroom, I can do the same with a random girl, right? Linda squirmed immediately. Alex, you don't get it. This is different. Then, as if trying to compromise, she said we could discuss the idea of me inviting another woman later. She was so obvious about wanting to defend her choice, her friend Jeff. It was all so absurd. She was trying to push her agenda with any justification she could pull out of thin air. Look, I've always believed marriage is about partnership, something stable, where we have each other's backs. I worked my butt off to build a solid career, to provide for both of us. Meanwhile, Linda had been drifting more and more into these alternative ideas, meeting up with people from activist gatherings and weird self-growth seminars. She'd read blogs and articles that talked about progressive forms of marriage and ditching so-called outdated traditions. And that's where Jeff came into the picture. Jeff was, from my perspective, a real piece of work. He loved talking about freedom, always hanging around Linda's crowd, yoga, activism, those quirky workshops. I started suspecting Linda and Jeff might already be fooling around, and that this new threesome plan was just a cover to legitimize what had probably been going on behind my back. I refused immediately, but Linda kept pushing, as though trying to pound into my head that this was normal. She wanted to bring a stranger, at least a stranger to me, into my home. My marriage. Looking at her that day, I realized there was no way we'd grow old together if she was this dead set on hooking up with her buddy. Probably, divorce was the only reasonable route. The more she insisted, the angrier I got. So I changed tactics. I decided to pretend I was on board, just to teach Linda and Jeff a lesson. They wanted a wild, non-traditional, liberating night? Fine, I'd give them a night they'd never forget. All right, I said, forcing a reluctant smile. If this is so important to you, let's do it. Linda looked surprised, but lit up with excitement. She started describing how we'd arrange everything. I made sure to seem curious, even asking a few questions. Why specifically Jeff? I mean, He's just a friend, right? Maybe you have some other candidate in mind? She tensed up, the smile disappearing for a second. Well, yeah, of course he's a friend. We hang out a lot. We share the same interests. He's a good guy, and I just thought he'd be perfect for this. Her nervous answer only fueled my suspicion that something was definitely going on between her and Jeff. At that moment, I thought, if this is our last act as a married couple, I'm turning it into a show neither of them will ever forget. For the next few days, Linda and I hammered out the so-called details. I insisted we do a little dinner first, so I could ease into it. She was thrilled, practically glowing at the idea. She went all in, bought a bunch of sex shop stuff, and even brought home a couple of costumes. Hers was this black leather dominatrix outfit. She also had a latex suit for Jeff. Some bizarre superhero getup, or who knows what. When she showed it to me, I said I'd stay in normal clothes, playing the clueless husband. Then laughed like I was warming up to her idea. Linda clapped her hands, all excited, thinking I was actually getting turned on by it. You have no idea how incredible this is going to be, she kept repeating. Trust me, after a night like this, you'll feel so creative. I nodded, pretending to agree, but secretly, I was preparing my own plan. I went around the house installing hidden cameras everywhere. Living room, bedroom, kitchen, hallway, even outside. Every angle was covered, complete with microphones. If this was going to be my final blow to them, I wanted proof of every humiliating second. Finally, that Saturday arrived. The house looked all cozy. Snacks on the table, candles for ambience, and a bottle of wine right in the middle. Linda went off to pick up Jeff, giving me about half an hour to implement the final touches. As soon as she was out the door, I grabbed the wine bottle, poured a tiny bit into a glass, just enough to pretend I'd started celebrating. Then took out a big dose of laxatives. We're talking a serious dose, enough to cancel out any mindfulness or yoga-based control of bodily functions. All right, folks, I muttered to myself, dumping it all into the wine. Let's see how you handle this kind of closeness. But that wasn't the only trick up my sleeve. I decided to make the bathroom completely inaccessible. I locked the door from the inside, then climbed out through the tiny window. With a bit of maneuvering, I managed to shut it behind me, so that from outside, there was basically no way in short of smashing it down. Sorry, guys, I said to the empty house. Your path to relief is now officially blocked. Next, I scribbled a quick note for Linda. Work emergency. Some technical meltdown at the servers. This won't take long. I placed the note near the wine glass and hurried out, driving a few streets away so I could watch the live feed from my laptop in peace. 10 or 15 minutes later, Linda and Jeff showed up. Linda was in high spirits, with Jeff tagging along behind. He was tall but scrawny, wearing a clingy turtleneck and sporting a thin mustache that was probably meant to look stylish. In reality, he looked like a stereotypical nerd you could knock over with a shoulder bump. The moment they stepped inside, Linda spotted my note. Naturally, she called me right away. Alex, are you serious? You left? What happened? Big crisis at work, I replied, faking a weary sigh. I'll be back soon, but you two can start without me. You know, if you can't wait, then I'll walk in on you having fun, like a surprise, just how you like it. Linda laughed. She was obviously loving the idea that I was suddenly so enthusiastic. Finally, Alex, she said, excitement in her voice. I told you this would spark your imagination. You're going to love it. Her voice practically glowed with anticipation. Hanging up, I returned to my live feed. They'd settled in the living room. Linda looked relaxed while Jeff sprawled on the couch like he owned the place. Man, he said, crossing his legs. Alex actually agreed to all this? I really thought he was, too square. Some cuck. Linda gave a slight, awkward smile, clearly uncomfortable. Jeff, He's just very open-minded, and he trusts me. He may be kind of conservative, but that doesn't mean he's not a great husband. I watched, clenching my teeth in a mix of anger and amusement. Now they were both right in front of me, live and in color. Jeff tossed out cocky remarks. Linda tried to spin it as harmless flirting. Eventually, they reached for the wine. Linda poured 2 glasses. They clinked and took sips, nibbling on cheese and fruit. They started whispering about how they'd first met at yoga, praising each other's bravery for jumping into this experiment. All while sipping more wine. Soft music started playing, and they began slow dancing, getting handsy with each other. I rolled my eyes at the screen. 2 wannabe adult film stars acting out some steamy scene. After a few minutes, Linda suddenly remembered the costumes. She dashed upstairs, returning as a full dominatrix in tight black leather, looking like she stepped off a cheesy 1980s set. Jeff, meanwhile, struggled into his latex outfit, ending up looking like some bizarre cross between a deep-sea diver and a sad superhero. I almost laughed out loud, but kept a straight face, knowing exactly what was coming next. They were just about to begin their little role play when Linda's face suddenly twisted in discomfort. She clutched her stomach. "Oh, I need a minute," she mumbled, and headed toward the bathroom. Sitting in my car, I practically rubbed my hands together. Showtime. Jeff, still clueless, casually poured himself more wine. He had no idea what the 2 of them were about to endure. A minute later, I heard Linda's voice from behind the closed bathroom door. "Jeff, something's wrong with the door. It won't open." Jeff reluctantly got off the couch, waddling in his tight latex. He tugged the doorknob, huffing and muttering, but of course the door stayed locked. As he fiddled with it, Linda's expression went from frustration to outright desperation. Finally, she snapped. "Just bust this damn door down, Jeff. Try to be a hero." Jeff took a couple of steps back, pretended he'd knock the door off its hinges with a shoulder slam, and nearly bounced off it, stumbling back with a pathetic thud. I nearly choked from laughing so hard. Then came a sudden noise, a very loud, very obvious fart. Jeff doubled over, clutching his stomach. "Oh God, my gut," he groaned, looking at Linda in horror. I was howling in the car, tears in my eyes. Everything was going exactly as planned. Linda and Jeff realized the door wouldn't budge. Any sudden moves risked some pretty dire consequences. Linda began shouting in panic. The window! The window! Go around and climb in so you can unlock it from inside." Jeff, pale and sweaty, tried to hurry out the back door, but in his latex suit, he stumbled with every step, like a parody of a superhero. Right before he reached the door, he tripped and crashed onto the floor, prompting another thunderous fart. I nearly fell off my driver's seat laughing. Meanwhile, Linda realized her situation had reached critical mass. She blurted something like, "Oh my God, I'm going to crap myself," and started ripping at her leather dominatrix outfit. But the zipper was stuck. She was running from room to room, trying to peel it off, but it wouldn't budge. Gasping for breath, Linda was effectively a prisoner of her own fetish wear. Eventually, she managed to yank part of it off. But by then, her stomach pains were so bad there was no proper place to do her business. Desperate, her eyes landed on a large decorative vase in the corner. A big old urn we'd bought ages ago. Apparently deciding ancient Greek art wouldn't mind, she parked herself on it. The squelching noises that followed nearly killed me with laughter. Linda, perched on a vase, was like some deranged goddess on a throne of shame. On another camera feed, Jeff had made it outside, stumbling around the yard, still gripping his belly. He found the window, but realized it was sealed shut. Panicked, he tried yanking it open or maybe kicking it, but no luck. He noticed a tree branch lying on the ground and bent to pick it up, presumably to smash the glass. Except his stomach rebelled again. His face twisted in agony. The feed shook as he tried to tear off his latex suit. But that stuff clings like glue. Through my laptop, I muttered, "Yeah, that latex is airtight, buddy. You're basically vacuum sealed." But Jeff refused to give up. Red-faced and sweating, he managed to rip a hole near the crotch using that tree branch. Then, with zero dignity left, he squatted behind one of my decorative evergreens. A cute little tree I'd planted a year earlier. That pitiful sight completed my revenge. Linda on her vase, Jeff under my tree, each in their own stinking predicament. I sat in my car, tears streaming down my face from laughing so hard. They wanted a non-traditional, liberating night. Mission accomplished. Finally, I decided it was time to put the icing on the cake. I drove back to the house, and there was Jeff, squatting under the tree in a shredded latex suit. He looked like a miserable penguin in some twisted survival show. The smell was absolutely foul. I wrinkled my nose and stepped closer. He looked up at me, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Alex, I'm so sorry. It's not what you think. I can explain." I forced a grim smile. "Explain what exactly, Jeff? And by the way, that tree is a year old. I planted it, watered it, took good care of it, and you just turned it into your personal toy. Don't worry, I'll help you out." I offered him my hand, as though to help him stand. The second he blinked in confusion, I gave him a good shove. Jeff lost his balance and fell straight into his own little puddle of shame. He groaned, possibly sobbing, while I took out my phone to snap a few choice photos for my souvenir collection. Then I went inside to find Linda, still perched on that vase. She looked utterly defeated, furious, but also humiliated beyond belief. "Hi, Linda," I said, pretending to gag at the stench. "This place smells like a nuclear fallout site." "Congratulations." She just whimpered, eyes full of rage. "Remember when we bought that vase? We joked it was so durable, it'd last forever, just like our marriage. Well, you sure proved that wrong. Way to literally crap on everything we built, Linda." Her face went scarlet as realization hit that I'd orchestrated this whole fiasco. She started screaming, "You sick bastard! You planned this! You're out of your mind!" I laughed, unfazed. "Me? Out of my mind? You two did this to yourselves with your big creative experiment. Sorry, but I'm not sticking around. You might want to call in a hazmat team, or something once you're done painting the place." Linda hurled insults at me as I left, but I couldn't care less. Feeling deeply satisfied, I got in my car and drove off to find a hotel for the night. Later, in my cozy hotel room, I reviewed the video footage I'd gathered. Every second of Linda and Jeff's epic meltdown was neatly recorded in all its disgraceful glory. I edited a few especially juicy highlights into short clips, my personal reel. The next day, Linda called. She sounded exhausted, furious. "Alex, you'll pay for this. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to take you for everything in court." "Sure," I replied calmly. "Divorce is probably for the best. But watch the threats. You and Jeff might find yourselves covered in another round of trouble." I casually hinted that I had a top-notch home movie starring them. For emphasis, I sent her a quick teaser. The clip of Jeff ripping his latex suit and fertilizing my poor evergreen. But I didn't stop there. I dropped that same clip into a private online group Linda and her progressive friends used. They recognized Jeff instantly, and the comments were brutal. "Dude, new fetish much? What's with the latex meltdown, Jeff? Introducing the Chocolate Avenger." It was a total roast. And that, I suspect, was Linda's final straw. A few days later, she called again. No threats this time. Just a quiet question about a peaceful divorce settlement. Apparently, the idea of going viral wasn't nearly as appealing as she'd thought. I just smiled, knowing I'd won. So, that's my story. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. Take care out there.